Hey guys, welcome back. Now, if you can't tell, it's the start of the spookiest week of the year, and I'm super excited, obviously. Halloween has always been my favorite holiday, and so I wanted to make sure we do things up a bit around here for it this year. And what better way to get into the mood for some spine-chilling Halloween fun than to watch a bunch of scary movies in video game form. So this week I've scoured the video store's aisles for a few petrifying Super Nintendo games, all based on movies that are perfect for some hair-raising Halloween fun. So let's just get straight into these bone-chilling video game atrocities with one of the early 90s biggest horror movie releases. And first up, let's take a look at Bram Stoker's Dracula for the Super Nintendo. And while I've never played this one myself, I've never really heard much anything positive about it. But before we deal with that game, let's take a second to talk about the movie, because honestly, that's probably going to be the most interesting thing about this whole game.
Dracula.
This is another movie that I actually got to see with my mom and dad back when it came out, and I remember this movie getting pushed as a pretty big deal, which was kind of unusual for a big R-rated horror movie. I'm guessing due to it being directed by Coppola and having an absolutely all-star cast, and from what I remember, it was definitely different. I really like the sets and the visual effects of the movie, but besides Gary Oldman's now iconic look and take on Dracula, the rest of the movie was it was okay. And any scene that Keanu was in was just torturous to sit through, even back then as a kid.
I know where the bastard sleeps.
I know a lot of people these days talk about the wooden acting in the Star Wars prequels, but man, in my opinion, Keanu in Dracula is just as meme-worthy for how bad he is.
I've seen many strange things already.
But since this was a big movie release from Columbia Pictures, you better believe that Sony ImageSoft was here to belch it out onto every single system they could get it onto. Now, the Sega CD version of the game is probably the most well-known, since they made that one using state-of-the-art stuff at the time. But that's not what we've got here on the lowly Super Nintendo, because what we ended up with here is more like a low-rent Castlevania. And that's exactly the impression that you get as soon as you see this box. And while it's nothing too special, I gotta say that I always did love the look of this title. That's just classic horror to me. But the back of the box is mostly just bland. The screenshots are at least here, but they don't really look that great. And the text over here is trying its hardest to make you think that this game is just as big of a deal as the movie. It even goes so far to say that this has incredible 3D graphics. And I'm gonna tell you right now, there ain't a damn thing in this game that comes close to 3D. Half the time it can barely be bothered to do 2D. But just for the time being, let's put all that to the side and see if this game itself is less of a car wreck than it's been made out to be. Get into the game and I hate this already. You take control of Jonathan Harker, who doesn't control too bad at first, but you'll quickly realize that he's apparently cursed to constantly walk on ice as he slides forwards and backwards with even the slightest movement. And normally this wouldn't be too awful, but just about every enemy in this game is making a beeline straight for Harker, and your only way of attacking them is with this tiny dagger that has almost zero range, and depending on the enemy, even less range than it seems, since your dagger doesn't always connect even when you're stabbing right through them. This means that you're just constantly taking damage because everything's hitting you before you can even get close enough to hit them. And even then, you're usually getting hit while you're hitting them. You can at least find a sword in the first level that's a decent upgrade, but even just doing that it's super weird. In fact, let's just get into that because I don't know where else to go with this. So you wander around the first stage a bit and you'll eventually find Van Helsing standing around. Walk up to him and he'll think about a weapon. Okay, sure. He doesn't give it to you or anything like that, he just apparently likes the idea of this sword. But what that means is that you can now find the weapon somewhere in the stage. That has to be like the most convoluted way of getting a weapon upgrade I've ever seen in a game. And it's not even consistent because sometimes you'll just find weapons out in the open without finding Van Helsing. It's just a super strange way of doing things. I'm not sure why they made it like this. But that's not the only reason you need to find Van Helsing, because if you don't, then you won't be able to exit the stage. Sure, you can find the end of the level, but nothing's gonna happen. But if you wander up to Van Helsing, then the exit will appear somewhere. And you know how you actually exit the stage? Not by walking to it or jumping into the giant text that says exit. No, what you actually have to do is walk up to it and then duck in the vicinity of the exit sign. And then just everything explodes for some reason. Just why? But that's the basics of how you play this thing. You wander around these pretty bad levels, swing at enemies that are either already up your ass or on their way in because of the constant respawning, and just hope that you can survive until you either find Van Helsing or a boss shows up. And special mention also goes to these completely bullshit stage traps too. Like, look at this. Look how accurate you have to be with this dude to just make it through these things. And if you get hit, all of your health is gone in like a second because there's no invincibility state of when you get hit. It's like everything in this game was designed to maximize the amount of annoyance that you have with it. And the bosses that I mentioned are just as bad, but at least they break up the awful action with their own awful issues. None of them have no more than 2 attacks, and that's being generous, all of which they just repeat over and over regardless of where you are or what you're doing. It's the kind of boss battles where you'll end up hurting yourself out of sheer tedium more than any challenge that they pose. I mean, I guess the game does have a decent look to it, and it does have some nice enemy variety, even if that variety consists of things that you'd never be fighting in a Dracula game, like scorpions and drunk guys throwing bottles at you. The colors the game uses are mostly subdued, which I guess works for the game, but nothing stands out at all. There's no big set pieces or anything like that, which sucks because that was like the one thing from the movie that I really liked. The castle levels could look like something out of Castlevania if you just squint hard enough though, but at that point, you may as well just go play Castlevania. Any of them are better than this. Bram Stoker's Dracula for the Super Nintendo is the quintessential Sony ImageSoft published game. It looks okay, but plays like they gave the developer a shoestring budget and like 4 weeks to finish it. And that really sucks because this one was actually developed by Psygnosis, and those dudes have made legendary games before and after this. I guess it's good to know that they'd at least still have a lot of success after this, but man, Dracula has to be a dark stain on what's an otherwise amazing resume. So as always, thanks Sony ImageSoft, you always bring out the best in your developers. Anyway, I think it goes without saying that even if you're a fan of the movie, just stay away from the Super Nintendo version. Maybe try out that Sega CD game though if you're curious, because that one's at least kinda neat to look at, even if it is nearly unplayable. But as for this one, I don't think even Dracula would want to suck on this sucky 16-bit horror show. Next up, we've got Warlock for the Super Nintendo, and this is actually maybe one of the more confusing releases that I've seen on the system. It's definitely one of those games that kind of makes you do a double take after learning that it even exists. Now, I've only ever seen bits and pieces of the Warlock movie over the years, but even with barely knowing anything about the movie, I don't think the game has much to do with it. Even though this game is apparently based off the first film, according to what I could find online, the story and what you're actually doing in the game more closely follows Warlock Armageddon, which is the 1993 sequel. And even though the original Warlock movie was barely successful and had absolutely zero sway with kids at the playground, that still didn't stop the madmen at LJN and Real-Time Associates from blessing us with a Super Nintendo game. Like I've said before, you could get any game made back then. But let's just say you were some sort of Warlock super fan back then, and you were just hankering for a video game based on your favorite movie. Well, would this box get your attention? I mean, it is the poster from the movie, but as the front of the Super Nintendo box, it's not really doing much for me, even if you do have a cool title. But hold on, because holy crap, just look at the back of this box. I don't even care what the front of the box is, because this right here, this would have instantly sold me on playing this game. Fire-breathing dragons, demons, undead skeleton warriors, whatever the hell this thing is over here in the dungeon's bowels. I mean, sweet Christ, man, sign me up. And if the game is even half as good as these screenshots, then this is like the best game that's ever been made. But something tells me that we may end up having this game drop out of our bowels before we have any fun with it. As mentioned, the actual story to the game is more in line with Warlock 2, just switched up a little bit. This one has you playing as a young druid on your quest to find the 6 runestones to stop that pesky warlock that's recently shown back up. You do at least get a nice little cinematic where your warlock is resurrected like a ghost from Ghostbusters, and then has your character wandering up to your druid friends and being like, "Hey, you guys know that warlock? He just got resurrected over there." And they're like, "Yeah, sure, you just go over there, buddy." And thus starts your quest to save the world from the warlock in this very cozy looking village. And the first thing you'll notice is that this is yet another one of those games that's decided to have a ton of character animation over having responsive controls. And it's not even like Flashback or Out of This World where everything is following the same timing as your character. Because everything in Warlock reacts like you're playing super ghouls and ghosts while your character just takes ages to turn around. And you have to be able to react, because this is essentially an action game whenever you strip all that warlocky stuff away, and not a very good one. Once you do get your bearings with the controls finally, you're gonna need to learn how to play this bad boy, and thankfully it's actually got some neat tricks up its cloak. Your standard attack is your magic druid wand, which can send out a burst of druid energy straight ahead, and it works well enough, but it's also kinda slow, making for sluggish attacks on top of already sluggish movement. One neat thing that you do have though is this little floating orb thing that can also be used as a projectile attack, but it can also be used to grab items that are just out of reach. Unfortunately though, and you may be seeing a pattern here, it's also kind of slow and finicky to get it to do what you want it to do. Honestly, I just use it more as a thing to pick up spells with, since without it you have to walk over to them and then duck down to actually pick them up, and I hate when games make you do that. But the game's big back-of-the-box selling point is its whole magic system, which is admittedly pretty interesting whenever you look at it in the manual. Your character can find several magic spells laying around all the stages, and you have up to 9 slots to hold them all in, making it feel like you should have this crazy arsenal of magic the more you play. In practice though, you'll probably just have a bunch of healing potions, since that just seems like the one magic spell that the game's constantly trying to give you, probably because you're taking damage all the damn time. The rest of the spells like earthquakes and smart bombs aren't even as cool as they sound, since they only damage certain enemies or things in the stage. So you just kind of have to know that weak smart bombs only hurts living things, while the strong smart bombs just hurt the undead. The rest of the spells are just so rare that I only ever saw them like once while exploring, and honestly it wasn't worth the time spent finding them. And really, overall, the gameplay's it's kinda sad. It feels awful to move around in, your main attack is awkward and slow, and the whole magic system barely makes a difference besides just using your entire inventory for healing potions. The stages themselves can be fairly large, making you explore pretty much every corner to find those runestones, but thanks to the repetitive enemies and just generally uninteresting switch-throwing puzzles, I just kinda got tired of finding my way through them. Those enemies populating the stages are at least fun to look at, just like they were on the back of the box, but they're not any fun to kill. They usually take way too many hits or just keep respawning over and over again, and the game loves to put you in a gauntlet of them back to back to back. So besides the graphics and just the overall dark atmosphere of the game, there's just nothing keeping you from turning this off after a few stages. Warlock is just a really weird Super Nintendo release, not only for the fact that it's based around a horror movie that kids didn't even care about, but that it got released at all. Like, was LJN just desperate at this point to use up whatever licenses it had at the time? Because I can tell you right now that no one was asking for a Warlock game. Because even without the Warlock license, and honestly, who cares, this would have at least been a neat little spooky action-adventure game with some fun magic if it wasn't just so damn annoying to play. Like I said, it's got some great moody settings, and I do love the whole dark fantasy vibe of the whole thing, but everything else about this game is just firmly in the not very fun category. It's to the point where this game's actually making me want to recommend someone watch the movies rather than play this game. But I mean, honestly, just don't do either of those, since it's probably best to just never resurrect this Warlock again in any form. And finally, we've got Casper for the SNES. Now, I'm actually gonna bet that like half of you had no idea that this game even came out on the Super Nintendo. Probably thanks to it releasing in 1996, which I think a lot of us kids would classify as around the same time as when we started handing off our Genesises and our Super Nintendos to our little brothers, since a lot of kids had just moved on to the Sega Saturn and PlayStation by then. And if you're thinking, well, maybe they were just bringing this out for when the movie was released. Well, not really, since Casper the movie came out the year prior. But I will say that I was a fan of that movie. I actually remember going to see this one with my family when it was first released, and I thought it was a pretty fun little movie. Casper himself looked awesome with all that new CGI, and the whole thing had this creepy, almost Tim Burton atmosphere to it, especially the mansion. Now, I will admit that I have not seen Casper since then, so I have no idea if it still holds up these days. But at the time, I thought it was a fun trip to the theater.
You guys are disgusting, obnoxious creeps.
Thank you.
Now you might be asking yourself, well, how would that actually hold up as a video game? Well, first off, you're probably not actually asking that, but I'm going to tell you anyway, and it's not very well. But more on that here in a second. As for the box though, I mean, well, it's Casper, and you can't really go wrong with that. If you were a fan of the movie and you saw this on the shelf at your video store, then I think this would at least get you to pick it up. But the back of the box, it may actually make you put it back down, because what on earth is going on over here? There's like this bright green border slapped on top of all these super cropped in screenshots, to the point that you can't even tell what you're actually looking at. You'd have no idea what this game's even about just going by these alone. But let's just say that not even this could keep you from renting everyone's favorite friendly ghost. Well, get ready for something that's even more terrifying than anything in the actual movie. Man, I don't even really know where to start with this one. Casper isn't your typical licensed game. It's not a platformer, and it's definitely not an action game. Instead, it's more like Rocco's Modern Life on the Super Nintendo, one of those games where you kind of have to sorta guide the thing that you're babysitting through the level. But even that really doesn't properly describe this game, since it's also like a Metroidvania / puzzle game. It's just a big old weird mess of a game. But basically what you do in the game is you take control of Casper as you lead Cat through the mansion. You do this by leading her through various rooms, fighting off enemies, and solving puzzles. And all of these relies on Casper's ability to change into different objects, which you have to find first, since just about every new form will either be able to take out a certain enemy or a boss, along with other forms that are meant for Cat to get into new areas of the mansion. And that's all you do through the entire game, and really it's not that bad on its own. Even Cat herself is one of the less annoying things to babysit in these kind of games, since she'll usually duck out of harm's way or just not progress until you clear a path that she can walk to. But it's just doing all these things that makes Casper so damn annoying. And first, let's just take a look at what you'll be doing the most in the game, which is flying around and dealing with the other haunted crap that's in the mansion. Casper himself controls like a floating bathtub, with you constantly having to under and overcorrect your movement just to get him to go where you want him to go. On top of that, you've got the enemies in the game, like flying books, flying fruit, and just other flying crap that's coming at you so fast that you have no time to react at all. Sometimes you'll just walk into a new screen and get hit immediately. And it's not even really about dodging them, because then you have to cycle through your various forms just to find the one that'll defeat whatever's flying around, since it's not just one single form that takes out the enemies. Like how the flying books need the net to catch them, or the fruit needs the spatula to knock them off the screen. And usually by the time you find the form you need and then do the slow animation to change into it, you've taken even more hits. But even if you do manage to do all that pretty quick, you've then got to actually contend with how annoying it is just to deal with the stuff that's coming at you. Since all of the enemies are just kind of flying and bouncing around all over the place, you've got to manage to control Casper's slow-ass self just to get him in front of him and then hope that you hit him. And some of his forms, like the spatula, are so damn tiny that it's almost impossible to line up and hit the stuff that you need to hit. You also have to deal with the game's sort of boss encounters, which are Casper's three brothers, Stinky, Stretch, and Fatso. And these guys usually show up in certain rooms, and like everything else, they all take their own individual Casper form to beat them. Stinky needs the perfume to shoot into his mouth every time he burps, which is easier said than done. Fatso has you shooting him as he bounces around the room, and Stretch needs a plunger to the face to take him down. It's always the same fight too, but I'd rather be fighting these guys than yet another room full of bouncing fruit. So the action and controls are terrible. Well, how about exploring the mansion and just getting around it? Well, honestly, that's not too bad. It's probably the most enjoyable thing about the whole game. Exploring the mansion and finding the new forms to get past obstacles in your way is rewarding enough, but trying to remember where you need to go or just backtrack to is the worst part of the whole thing. Because in case you haven't noticed yet, there's not much variety to the mansion. It seems like there's maybe like half a dozen different backgrounds to go through in the entire game, so it all just kind of starts to blur together after a little while. Plus, the map screen's so small that it really doesn't help things much. But I will say that if you can manage the bad controls and constant annoying enemy encounters, then finding your way through the mansion can be fun. But really, that's about it. I'm not lying when I say there's almost nothing new that happens after like the first 15 minutes of playing this game, since by then you've found most of the forms and have seen pretty much every puzzle that the game's gonna throw at you. It's just gonna do it over and over again. And at that point, it's mostly just about you finding your way through the mansion and enduring it all, the latter of which is probably the hardest part of the whole game. It's definitely a weird one and kind of interesting just due to that, but overall, unless you just like really punishing puzzle adventure games, I think you could probably leave Casper here to roam his mansion by himself. And that's gonna do it for me this week, because I don't think I can take any more of these ghoulish attempts at video games. But since it is Halloween, I want to hear what your guys' favorite Halloween movies were back then, or even now really. Obviously, we got a lot to pick from the 80s and 90s, so let me know in the comments below which one gave you the chills. Oh, and maybe give this video a like if you had a bit of fiendish fun watching it. And also, if you want to see some more horrific videos like the one you just watched, then go ahead and give this channel a sub while you're at it. But that's gonna do it for me this week. Thanks to all of you ghouls and goblins for watching, and have a great Halloween.